welcome to Virtuoso, Founding Fuel's podcast on ideas that shape the future of business. I'm your host, Indrajit Gupta. In this two-part special, we sit down with Professor Prithwiraj Choudhury of Harvard Business School, whose research on work from anywhere and his book that emerged out of that is not only timely but visionary. In part one, we explore the origin story, any surprising findings, and what companies around the world can learn from this radical shift. Welcome, Prithviraj.
Thank you so much, Indrajit, for the
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah. So we'll dive straight in. I'll start with that moment when you realized the office could be anywhere. What shaped this thesis?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. Not too many people ask that question. So, I've been studying the topic of migration for close to 15 years now. So I've been at HPS for 12 years. I was at Wharton for 3 prior to that. And my roots are in studying migration. And I was studying migration, both the positives of migration for individuals and companies. But then I realized that there's also a whole set of challenges in moving people across geographic regions. And I think the moment came to me when I was in Kenya. I was studying this Chinese migration into Kenya that was related to the Chinese investment in infrastructure. And the infrastructure was very impressive. But if you spoke to the Chinese technicians and the engineers in Kenya, all of them in private had one complaint. They all wanted to go back to China. And the reason was that their parents were getting old, and the single child policy in China meant that there were no siblings or anyone else to look after the parents back home. And then as a scholar, I started taking the pains of migration really seriously. And I read the historian Sunil Amrit, which I recommend everyone read, and how he documented the pains of South Asians, including Indians, migrating to Indonesia or to the Gulf, and how the only way to converse with your family would be to record your voice on an audio cassette. And then I wrote this article on the challenges of migration. And that at that point, I started thinking, why move people? Why not instead move work to where people want to live? And that was the genesis of Work from Anywhere.
Very interesting. And I know that you're kind of currently based in Calcutta, and you've traveled across countries and continents. How did your background, to your mind, inform your research?
Yeah, so I think, I have been traveling all my life. So I was born in Calcutta, but I went to Kharagpur and then IIM Calcutta. But then I joined McKinsey, which was fun because as a young person, you were on a flight every week, but then you were on a flight every week. And so, we traveled extensively. And then I was in the next phase of my career in the Southeast Asia. I was working in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. And then I moved to the US. So, I've moved all my life. And of course, that meant that like all the millions of migrants around the world, I've made personal sacrifices. There were birthdays missed. There were anniversaries missed. There were occasions when I needed to be with my parents that I couldn't show up. And so I think all of that clearly shaped my thinking on this topic.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'll just, Prithviraj, fast forward to COVID-19, because that was, some would argue, a global experiment in remote work. And we were pitchforked into it without much preparation in many cases. Uh, to your mind, what surprised you and what validated your prior work in some ways during that period?
Yes, so I was studying Work from Anywhere before COVID-19. And the way that happened was I started a project with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, of all places. And they were in many ways visionaries on this phenomena. So in 2012, they started a policy that they didn't call Work from Anywhere. They called it TEEP, some scientific acronym. But the policy was that if you are a patent examiner in the US, you can now go and live anywhere in the US. And they had a mandate for 5 years from the US Congress. But they had to go back and report to Congress about what the productivity effects of that was. So I was around in the patent office digging in, different data projects, and they said, "Do you want to study this?" And I jumped at it, and that was when I did my USPTO study, which showed that in the patent office, productivity went up 4.4% because of work from anywhere. And that study was published. And then my colleagues and many other skeptics said, okay, patent examination is a very special kind of job. It can work for that, but not for my job, or not for this job, or not for the CEO's job. And I think what the COVID-19 experiment proved to many people, including me, was that there is a way to make it work for almost every job in the world.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, um, I just kind of focus a little bit back on your research, and if you can kind of surface what, to your mind, was the most surprising finding in your research, something that perhaps went against conventional wisdom, what would that be?
Yeah, so this is probably an opportunity, Indrajit, to sort of harp in on what work from anywhere is.
Yeah,
Because the misconception many people have is work from anywhere is synonymous with work from home.
yeah,
It is not.
yeah.
Work from anywhere is not the same as work from home. Uh, so work from home, we all know. I'm not going to explain that. Work
Sure.
from anywhere is a work arrangement where the worker gets to choose where to live. So it's about geographic freedom, which city, which town, which state, and sometimes even which country they can live in. Now, once you've chosen that city or that state or the country, you can work from home. That's one choice. You can go and work from a co-working space. If a few of you from the same company are in the same town, you can start your own satellite office. All of that is work from anywhere. So what I think has been most revealing to me as an academic is that work from home is not the only form of remote work. There is a whole deal that many companies are missing out, which is work from anywhere.
Got it. Got it. That's interesting. But you've also, in your book and in the research that you've kind of written about, cited many companies that have made distributed work succeed, right? Do you have a personal favorite beyond the US Patent Office that you talked about a little while ago?
No, absolutely. I think there are hundreds and thousands, thousands of companies that practice work from anywhere. So I can give a few examples,
Sure.
and then I can talk about one or two favorites.
Yeah.
So a whole slew of tech companies. So Atlassian, Airbnb, Shopify, Spotify, Nvidia, which is one of the world's most
Most valued.
highly valued companies. They all follow work from anywhere. Recently, I've written extensively about the European Central Bank, which is the world's second largest federal bank. They have a work from anywhere policy. One of the world's largest and most reputed law firms, Emmanuel Quinn, they have a work from anywhere policy. And then I think what's really interesting is for the startup world in the West, now work from anywhere is the default. If you start a company, you set it up as a work from anywhere model. And we can talk about the business case.
Sure.
But my favorite was, the company that taught me a lot, which is GitLab. So GitLab was work from anywhere forever. And they tried to bring people together and in an office, and they rent an office and no one comes. But what they did, which many companies don't do, was they invented management practices to support work from anywhere. So actually, GitLab taught me a lot instead of, I think academics learn a lot from super smart entrepreneurs and managers. So what I
Absolutely.
write about in the book is essentially what I've learned from GitLab and Zapier and from Mob Squad and these cutting edge startups, which have invented the work from anywhere operating model.
Any particular examples that you'd like to cite in terms of next practices?
Yeah, so there are many. So, work from
Sure.
anywhere, what I write in the book is it has three sort of challenges. There's a challenge of isolation. There is a challenge of socialization. How do we get new people socialized? How do we mentor young people? And the challenge of knowledge sharing. So let me spend, and we can talk about all three.
Sure.
But GitLab really focused on knowledge sharing. And one of the best practices they created was what they call the single source of truth, that you need to have information that's up to date available to everyone, because now you cannot tap the shoulder and ask a question. And the way they did that was to invent the process of writing constantly. So, we all of us like to work. We don't like to document our work.
That's
But
right.
GitLab made its culture all about writing. And even the CEO, Sid, the CEO then, was famously saying, I write for a day. And if you don't like to write, don't work at GitLab. And this was all pre-Gen AI. Now codification has become really easy with Gen AI.
Got
But
it.
GitLab really, really invented the wheel in terms of the codification process.
But what you're describing seems a lot more pervasive compared to, say, let's say, an Amazon, which has also a writing culture, right? Which it has invested behind, and it's mandatory. If you don't know how to write a memo, then you don't survive there for long. But is GitLab a lot more pervasive in the way they've implemented the codification that you described?
Yeah, it is. And thanks for asking that, because it's not only writing, it's also about transparency.
Okay.
So there's a thing on the web that anyone can access. So anyone listening can go to GitLab and read up the GitLab handbook. So
Wonderful.
the GitLab handbook has details about any question that starts with the word how. How do we set salaries in GitLab, and how do we promote people in GitLab? And their mantra is, if there's not a question that's been answered, it's the duty of the person who found the gap to fill that in. But
Wonderful.
also, let me mention one interesting thing, Indrajit. So when people talk about culture, GitLab actually has very smartly made transparency one of its cultural facets. So they say we are a transparent company, and look how transparent our code book is. So they've turned the operating model into evidence of transparency. And
Wonderful.
now, if you're a GitLab employee, you believe that, because now you have all the questions about the promotions in the next step in front of you.
Got it. Very interesting. We'll take certainly a look at this handbook that you speak about for sure. A little while ago you spoke about the pushbacks that you faced even when you were kind of shaping your thesis, both among professional research colleagues as well as I'm sure in industry as well, for people who hadn't converted to this whole way of working. Today, many worry certainly about the loss of innovation or spontaneity. How do you address those concerns?
Sure. So the way you think about work from anywhere is, you first of all think about the business case, and I can outline the business case in one sentence. The business case is about attracting and retaining diverse talent. Because if you are a work from anywhere company, then you are not restricted to any local geographic labor market. You're not only hiring from Mumbai. Now you can hire from the northeast of India. You can hire from Chhattisgarh. So your labor market just expands dramatically. And that helps all companies, but especially helps startups. Because then startups are not competing for top talent in the hub of Bangalore, and not having to pay or the same benefits or whatever that the Googles and the Facebooks and Amazons are paying in Bangalore. Uh, so it's about hiring, but it's also about retaining, because there's long-standing research showing that women especially have foregone career opportunities because of geography. So if you're a woman working in Bangalore and your next promotion needs you to go to Hyderabad, sometimes your spouse or kids don't want to move and you have to forego that promotion. But if your companies work from anywhere, then you don't have to move. So it's about attracting and retaining talent. Now, about spontaneity, there are many ways to simulate that in a work from anywhere environment. First, work from anywhere doesn't mean you never meet. So in the book, what I do is I try to expand the definition of hybrid. So what most people call hybrid, I call it weekly hybrid. But there's also two other versions of hybrid: monthly hybrid and quarterly
Quarterly.
hybrid,
Yeah.
where the teams are together, once a month for a whole week, or once a quarter for a week or longer, where you get a lot of spontaneity. And there are other tools such as virtual water coolers. And there's a very interesting new area that some startups are pioneering, which is called brain writing.
Okay.
So instead of brainstorming, you can have the same simulated exchange of ideas while writing. And what the research by Rebecca Hines, who was at Stanford earlier, is showing is that brainwriting helps introverts ideate. Because in
Indeed.
brainstorming, the people who are talking are the leader and the extroverts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll look that up because I'll be particularly interested in that. Because these are experiments that we've all got to tune into. There was one other case study that I found fascinating when we spoke, and then you touched upon it in your essay, which is the Turkish power company, Energisa Urutim. I hope I got the pronunciation right. But they were the first ones you wrote who adopted a remote first kind of model, even for mission critical operations. And in our conversation, you had described it as a potential next generation outsourcing model as well, if I remember right. What can companies in India, particularly in infrastructure heavy or legacy industries, learn from this case, to your mind?
Yeah. Indeed, can I actually just add one more point to your previous
Sure,
question?
sure,
Because I think
sure,
it's very
sure, sure.
important.
Please, please.
So this question about serendipity and spontaneity, the other thing that CEOs and leaders should keep in mind is that in the physical office, serendipity is it happens, yes, but it's a very bounded process. So what I mean by that is the research by MIT professor Tom Allen has shown that in the physical office, we meet people within 25 meters of where we sit. So if two employees are sitting on different floors, you
No
rarely meet.
chance. Mm,
And if you're in different campuses of the same company, I'm sorry, different buildings on the same campus, you will never have a serendipitous conversation.
that's
So
right.
that means you're having physical in-person serendipity with the same 5, 7, or 10 people every day. But your
Absolutely.
team might be all over the world.
Yeah.
And so a better way to engineer serendipity is through virtual water coolers, where you randomly bring people who can actually have serendipitous conversations through a virtual water cooler or a virtual campus. And the book has details.
Got it. Got it. Terrific.
But let me now, should I answer
Yeah, yeah,
the?
please, please. Yes.
So, one of the criticisms of the work from anywhere model for years has been, is this only for knowledge workers, people who can work with a laptop? And I think what's changing that is digital twins. So digital twins are a combination of sensors, the cloud, AI, and automation, where you can create a digital replica of a factory, of a power plant, of a hospital ward, of a farmland, of an airport, any physical operation. And once you have that virtual replica on your computer in real time, then not everyone has to be in person in the factory or the farmland or the warehouse. And this is what's now taking over the world. I would say this is a phenomena that's very real, unlike the metaverse. And this is a phenomena that Indian companies should pay attention to. So Enerjisa Üretim is the Turkish company I studied. They have 24 power plants all over Turkey. And their problem was the best engineers and technicians did not want to go and live in the village or mountain of Turkey. They wanted to live in Istanbul because that's where the schools are. And so they created a digital twin headquarters in Istanbul, where from one room, they operate 24 power plants now. And now the interesting thing is, and I've written a case study on this. The fascinating thing is, once they figured out how to do this, now they are taking this technology to Qatar and Saudi Arabia and selling digital twin licenses. So earlier they were selling power to the grid. Now they've become a tech company selling digital twin licenses to Qatari power plants and Saudi power plants. So I
Terrific.
would say this is a lesson for Indian companies that in your space, an L&T or whoever can become the pioneer digital twin company in the world.
And this would apply not just, I'm guessing, to continuous process industries, like power is a continuous process. So, do you think there is opportunity to extend the same concept in across other heavy industries as well?
Absolutely. I think all it needs, the basic principle is that if you can put sensors and cameras to collect the data you need in real time, to have a model of the operation on your computer, then you can have AI algorithms predicting how to run it. So that's what Energesia is doing. So they have a model on the computer. AI is making a prediction. So in this case, what should be the water flow? What should be the turbine speed? And then the engineer only accepts the AI recommendation or overrules it. That's the only job of the engineer.
Got it.
So I would imagine that can be broadly done in any kind of manufacturing.
And you had talked about service industries as well. You spoke about I think, a hospital in Boston, if I'm not mistaken, which has also looked at a digital twin kind of operation. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
so hospitals in New York. So they have done
New
an
York.
electronic ICU
Okay.
where they're putting sensors on the patient beds. And the doctors, what they're now doing is they're splitting up the doctors. There's an in-person group, but there's also a team of doctors who are monitoring the patients remotely from their homes in this case. And what my doctoral student found was that that improved the patient outcomes for a majority of patients. And now the NHS in UK is starting this virtual ward program where patients will be kept at their houses. They'll be wearing sensors, and the nurses and doctors will be monitoring them from afar.
This is super, because this is equally relevant for India as well, given the fact that we don't have our doctor to patient ratios are completely skewed, right? But one of the things that I often hear from friends in healthcare is that there is resistance, right, to change and to technology adoption, which is a prerequisite, I'm guessing, in the transformation of this kind. And I wanted to look at the larger theme around this resistance, because even as many firms that you've studied are doubling down on remote or hybrid kind of setups, there are many others like Goldman Sachs, for instance, who are looking at return to office mandates. Now, this seems to be at odds with the evidence on productivity and innovation in decentralized models. So, why do you think many traditional firms are still resistant to work from anywhere, even in the face of strong data? What's driving the pushback?
Yeah. So in short, I think there are two or three reasons. One is there is inertia, organizational inertia. So, some senior leaders are caught up in their mental maps of how work should be done. There's a significant issue of trust in many companies. So the ideology is that we don't think they will work if we cannot see them. My response to that is then you have hired the wrong people and you're not measuring productivity the correct way, because in the book what I write is productivity should be measured based on the quality of work, not hours worked, or not how many times the manager sees my face.
That's right.
But there are also other reasons, Indrajit. So I think the evidence emerging of RTO is that RTOs are being used as a tool for voluntary layoffs. So, my colleague Mark Ma has done a very good study of RTOs in the West. And what he and his colleagues find, is that RTOs have led to no different financial performance. So they looked at Amazon's RTO and the Dell RTO and all the RTOs. But RTO had no positive impact on the stock price. RTOs only led to about 9% employees leaving immediately, 13% women and 4% men. And the thing is, you don't have to pay them full benefits. So my argument is RTOs are being used as a tool for layoffs, not for productivity.
Very interesting, because the two things that I heard after your essay and your extract was published in Founding Fuel were two things. One is, oh, we've heard about data which signals 30% drop in productivity. To moment there is some pressure on targets, we'd like people to come back to office, as if that's going to be a magic wand that will change the. How do you respond to such concerns?
So the evidence on productivity is overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly positive. And I think the other thing to think about productivity is, and that's what I argue in the book, that companies embracing work from anywhere or hybrid, and you can do work from anywhere in hybrid, uh, you have to develop new management practices. We talked about knowledge codification. We talked about virtual water coolers. We talked about measuring productivity in a different way. So it's not just getting Zoom. It's also about getting new management practices.
That's true.
And in the book, I lay out this step by step that if you're doing a weekly hybrid model, the most important management practice is scheduling. Because what's happening in a weekly hybrid model in many, many companies is you say 3 days a week. But if you and I are on the same team, then I come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So our overlap is just a day. So the
Absolutely.
most important management practice is scheduling in that case. In monthly hybrid, I list all the management practices important for that. And quarterly hybrid, again, I do the same. So if you invest in the right management practices, productivity is for sure not going to decline. It will probably improve.
Terrific, terrific. This is most useful. Now, this was just the global arc. In our next episode, we will bring it home to India. What happened when Professor Choudhury, Prithwiraj, presents his ideas to the chief economic advisor, which he did yesterday, I think, could work from anywhere, transform India's economic prosperity and make it truly inclusive. Tune in to part two. Thank you.